Though her parents were uneducated, they were determined to send all three of their children to college. Sister Edith was one of the first black students to attend Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio, and Coretta joined her there a few years later. She was a gifted musician and loved singing from a young age. She transferred to Antioch to the New England Conservatory of Music on scholarship, studying voice and violin. A friend introduced her to Martin Luther King Jr. while she was studying at the conservatory. She said she wanted me to meet a very promising young minister from Atlanta. She reflected with a laugh. I wasn't interested in meeting a young minister at that time. Coretta might have been reluctant, but that young minister knew he'd found his true love. On their first date, he told her, "You know, you have everything I wanted in a woman. We ought to get married someday." They married in June of 1953 at her family's home in Marion, Alabama. So after earning her degree in voice and violin, Coretta moved with her husband to Montgomery, Alabama, where he served as a pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. When it came to the civil rights movement, she worked side by side with her husband throughout the 1950s and 60s. She took part in the Montgomery bus boycott of 1955 and journeyed even to Ghana to mark the nation's independence in 1957. She also traveled to India on a pilgrimage in 1959 and worked to pass the 1964 Civil Rights Act, among other endeavors. But a lot of people don't realize or notice that throughout the marriage, the Kings clashed about Coretta's role. She was thoroughly committed to the civil rights movement and wanted to take a public leadership role. But MLK wanted her to focus on raising their four children. So despite her husband's wishes, Coretta Scott King stood by his side in the struggle for civil rights. While she raised their children, she also made speeches, gave freedom concerts to benefit the movement, and worked to get the Civil Rights Act of 1964 passed. So she was not just sitting at home with the babies. She was out there, and she was definitely right by his side. Fast forwarding, after MLK's assassination in 1968, she asked performer Josephine Baker to take the helm of the civil rights movement, but Baker declined. Baker was living her best life in Paris, and she was like, America is too much. I ain't being bothered with them. Coretta Scott King then stepped into the role herself. She campaigned hard for her husband's birthday to be made a national holiday. After 14 years of lobbying, 14 years, y'all. I don't know if you realize that. That's like several different presidents. 14 years is a lot. She finally succeeded when President Reagan signed the 1983 bill establishing MLK Day as a federal holiday. It wasn't until 2000, the year 2000, y'all, that all 50 states observed the holiday, with South Carolina last to put it on their books. Now, my family had moved to Arizona in 2002, and they had just had their first MLK Day that year that I went to visit my family. So, yeah. She even considered gay rights crucial to an equal nation, y'all.
LGBTQ. Coretta Scott King's little-known history as an LGBTQ advocate. Coretta Scott King is remembered by most as the wife of Martin Luther King Jr. and a fierce advocate for racial equality in her own right. But did you know she was also a warrior for the LGBTQ community? The civil rights activist has been credited for making room for the LGBTQ community in the civil rights movement, a controversial move in the late 80s and early 90s. She faced backlash for her involvement with LGBTQ rights. Critics believe she should have paid her full attention to racial equality instead.
I still hear people say that I should not be talking about the rights of lesbian and gay people, and I should stick to the issue of racial justice. But I hasten to remind them that Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere."
In 1983, Coretta asked openly gay poet Audre Lorde to speak at a rally celebrating the 20th anniversary of the 1963 March on Washington. It was considered an unofficial welcome to the LGBTQ community from Coretta, the King Center, and the civil rights movement as a whole. In 1993, Coretta held a press conference urging President Bill Clinton to repeal his "Don't Ask, Don't Tell" policy, banning LGBTQ people from serving openly in the military. It would be 2011 before President Barack Obama repealed the rule. Coretta eventually shifted her focus to legalizing same-sex marriage nationwide. She publicly denounced President George W. Bush's support for a constitutional amendment banning gay marriage and fearlessly fought for nationwide same-sex marriage until her death in 2006. The Supreme Court wouldn't rule for nationwide same-sex marriage until 2015, 9 years after Coretta's death. Share to spread Coretta's legacy of inclusion.
Yes, this pastor's wife was all about LGBTQ plus justice. This doesn't get talked about a lot, especially when it comes to a pastor's wife as large and memorable as Coretta Scott King. So the founder of the Committee for a Sane Nuclear Policy, she was devoted to pacifism and world peace. She strongly opposed the 2003 invasion of Iraq. So if you think that she opposed it, I wonder if her husband would have too. Most likely, yeah, because he was at the time fighting for poor people's rights.
Now, I want some of you all to go to Washington with us. Even if you have to bring your whole family, we are going to have in Washington facilities, and we're going to have food, and we are going to demand that the government do something about these conditions. Now, we want y'all to come on to Washington when you get out of school.
With the Poor People's Campaign, Martin is talking about taking these poor people to Washington, build tents, and live on the mall until this country did something about poverty. Said, you know, we can do better than this.
We assemble here together today with common problems.
He started to look at the option of bringing all poor and suffering people together. And it's like, you know, sort of, doggone it, let's take on the whole system. Let's deal with the systemic poverty.
Thank you very much. We're rushing to get over to Alabama, and we've enjoyed being in Mississippi today. Many people will go into Washington by foot. We're going to have a mule train also coming out of the South. In 1776, the nation signed a huge promissory note. In this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
King was, in fact, talking about redistribution of wealth. He was talking about passing money down and shaking the system up. The Poor People's March on Washington was going to shake the government to its core.
Can you imagine what will happen if all these black and white and brown people will go to Washington and build tents and live in tents in Washington? You're talking about a redistribution of the wealth of this country? Oh, no. No, no, no. You're talking about new tax laws? No, no. Don't let King get to Washington.
So that was the campaign that he was doing before his death, Poor People's Campaign. And that was a big deal. That was going to bring about awareness of how the working class was being paid, about the conditions of the schools, and other things that impact those of lower income. This was, some people speculate, the reason why he got assassinated, because he opposed capitalism. And if you oppose capitalism and you have a platform like that, yeah, it makes sense, right? Another great thing that I love about learning about Coretta Scott King is that middle school age girls in Atlanta can attend Coretta Scott King's Women's Leadership Academy. It is a public school with an emphasis on leadership, character development, and academic achievement. So yeah, she got a school named after her as well. So let's go back to, so in the aftermath of her husband's assassination, Coretta found the MLK Center for Nonviolent Social Change, serving as the center's president and the chief executive officer from its inception. This is a place that my family visited about 2 summers ago, and it's a very beautiful place, gorgeous, very informative if you like to read and learn things. So Coretta remained active through her demonstrations against apartheid in South Africa, and by expressing her views as a syndicated columnist and contributor to CNN. And in 1997, she called for a retrial for her husband's alleged assassin, though Ray died in prison the following year. That means she didn't believe that he actually was the shooter or acted alone. And something else that I thought was really interesting was that she suffered from a heart attack and stroke in 2005. Now, she died less than 6 months later on January 30th in 2006 while seeking treatment for ovarian cancer at a clinic in Playas de Rosito, Mexico. She was 78 years old. Coretta had 4 children with King. And now she has this amazing granddaughter that has taken the reins of being a powerful leader, a powerful woman leader, young woman leader. Here is one of my favorite quotes that I came across from her. I believe all Americans who believe in freedom, tolerance, and human rights have a responsibility to oppose bigotry and prejudice based on sexual orientation. Yes. And the last great quote. Women, if the soul of the nation is to be saved, I believe that you must be its soul. To highlight the brilliance and the strength behind the man was his wife, his dedicated, passionate, and equally active in social justice, Coretta Scott King. So thank you, Coretta Scott King, for this day that you gave us to remember not only your phenomenal husband, but also you.